What is up, TRP kids? And especially, what is up to the young ladies of TRP kids? I'm talking about Claire and Joanna and Vivian and Lucy and Molly and all of the young ladies in TRP kids, because this video is especially for you. But gentlemen, before you tune out, I want you to stay where you are, and I want you to hear this, because this is going to be important for your life, both right now and down the road, okay? So stay where you are. Okay? All right, now that we're all here. I got a text the other day from one of your teachers from TRP Kids, Miss Suzanne. And she said, Josh, I think it'd be really cool if we talked about the women of the Bible. Because for the most part, you know, the Bible stories are a bunch of guys. It's Abraham and Joseph and Moses and Noah and Daniel and the disciples and Jesus and all of these people that are just guys. And we don't talk about women enough. And I thought, that is brilliant. We should definitely do that. But we can't talk about all of them. But I wanted to highlight a few of them, specifically a few of them that show up in the Gospel of Mark. Remember, there are 4 stories told about Jesus in the New Testament. They're the Gospels, the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I want us to talk about Mark here because Mark's story is really subtle, and Mark's story has a lot of cool things to say about women. Now remember, a couple of videos ago, we talked about the disciples, and we talked about Jesus picking 12 people to follow him. And I don't know if this really was the point of the video, but you probably noticed that those 12 people were all guys. Now this fits within the context of the world when Jesus was around and doing ministry, when he was teaching and healing. And this is just kind of how it worked. He was a rabbi, and the people that followed rabbis, for the most part, were other men. So Jesus was surrounding himself with these 12 guys. Now what's so cool about this is in the Gospel of Mark, these 12 guys, they do not get what Jesus is talking about most of the time. In fact, the way that the story is told, we just see like their repeated failures over and over and over. And on its own, that's not great. Like, we don't want to celebrate that. But there's this sort of structure where the disciples demonstrate themselves to be sort of not really with it. Now, throughout the Gospel of Mark, there's also other characters. They're minor characters in the story. They're in fact unnamed women. But these unnamed women in the story, they are awesome. They get it. Like, they just understand what Jesus is all about, and they are right there with him. So we have these 2 pictures, the disciples who are kind of clunky and they don't really get it, and then we have all these women who show up, and they just show how faithful they are and how they are excited about what Jesus is doing. I want to tell you about some of these women. Okay, so there's one woman who, she has this sickness, and she's had this sickness for a long time. She spent a lot of money at the doctors, and like her whole life has been dominated by this sickness. And she thinks that if she can just get to where Jesus is and reach out and touch the hem of his garments, it says. You could think about like the cords on his hoodie or the shoelaces on his Nikes. Now, Jesus isn't wearing Nikes, but he would. He totally would if he was living here, but they didn't have Nikes back then. But if she could just reach out and touch some part of something that is attached to the clothes that Jesus is wearing, then she would be healed. And this happens. She weaves her way through the crowd and she reaches out and she touches him. And in some Gospels, it talks about like this power is leaving Jesus' body, and he realizes this. I forget if that happens in Mark or not. But when she shows up in Mark, Jesus says, your faith, it's healed you, and this is exemplary, because all these other people around me, like, they just don't get it, but you get it. And then there's this other woman who knows that Jesus can heal her daughter. It's sort of the same thing, and she goes after Jesus, and she finds him, and Jesus is eating, and she kind of gets into the room somehow, and she's like, Jesus, heal my daughter. She's sick, and without you, she's gonna die. And Jesus at first is like, no thanks, I don't want to do that. But then this woman, she's like, she won't let it go. And she's like, You know how sometimes your mom, like, she'll just get really intense about something, like getting you on the softball team, or making sure that your teachers are treating you right, or making sure nobody's bullying you. This is like that mom, and she's going into action. She's like, Jesus, you will heal my daughter. You have to heal my daughter. Without you, she has no hope. And Jesus says, you get it. You didn't let up, and you kept asking, and your daughter, she's healed. And then there's this woman going to the temple, and Jesus is sitting there, and he's watching all of this unfold. And there's a lot of super rich people, and they show up, and they're giving their offering, and they have like these big gifts, and they just dump them at the temple. And then there's this woman who shows up, and she has 2 small copper coins. They're worthless almost. They're not worth hardly anything. It'd be like going and dumping a penny or 2 into the offering, which it's not worth a lot. But Jesus sees what this woman is doing, and he says, I see all the rich people giving stuff that really doesn't matter to them, but this woman, this is all she has. And I know it's not a lot. I know it's not gonna like buy a new TV to throw up on the screens or whatever, but this 2 copper coins, that's all she has. And she's faithful in giving it. She gets it. Then there's this other woman later on in the story, and she shows up to this meal that Jesus is attending, and there's a bunch of guys, and some of his disciples are there, and they're eating this meal, and she kind of breaks into the room, and she's where she's not supposed to be according to the customs of the time, but she's there anyway. And she takes this alabaster jar, and inside is all this precious perfume, or this ointment, maybe like some lotions or something. It's really expensive. This is something that you would save or just hold on to because it's worth so much. And what she does is she just breaks it and puts it on Jesus. And everybody's like looking around saying like, what is happening right now? And some of the people at the table like were so mad, like, what is she doing? She's wasting all of this money. And Jesus is like, no. She's not wasting it at all. In fact, she understands what this is all about. And she understands that she could do nothing better with this gift than to give it to me right now. Then at the very end of the book, one more story. At the very end of the book, Jesus has been crucified, and Jesus was placed in the tomb. And then 3 women in the Gospel of Mark show up a couple days later to make sure that everything is okay. It's Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome. And they all show up, and they see that the stone's been rolled away and that Jesus isn't there. And then they talk to an angel who tells them, go and tell the disciples what you've seen. And I don't know if you understand this, but that makes these 3 women the first ones who announce that Jesus is alive. It makes them the first 3 preachers of the gospel. Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Salome, and they are the ones that have been entrusted with this really cool job to go and to tell the disciples who throughout the book didn't really understand what was going on. And now they're going to go and tell them what they've seen. So we have in the Gospel of Mark these 12 guys who don't really get it. We've got all these women, some of whom are unnamed, and they're faithful. And they're tenacious, and they just are after it the whole time, and they understand what Jesus is about, and they follow him, and they get it. So don't let anybody tell you what you are able or unable to do. Don't let anybody tell you what you can or cannot do. Don't let anybody tell you how you can or cannot serve in the church. If it was good enough for these 3 women to be entrusted with the gospel and go and tell everyone, it is good enough for you. It is my greatest desire that maybe some of you would grow up to be preachers of the gospel, because we need gifted, called, and anointed young women to go and preach. But even if that's not for you, what I would say is we can all look up to these examples and be faithful followers and take risks to advocate for people, to stick up for people, to go and to ask Jesus to help people, to be like that mom who just won't let it go and says, nope, you can help in this situation. May we all be like these women in the Gospel of Mark who get it. I hope that this sticks with you, and I hope that when you follow Jesus, you remember these stories in the Gospel of Mark, because they can transform all of our lives. Jesus wants you to serve him and wants you to do big, important things for him. So there you go. That is girl power in the New Testament, and I am all about it. Hopefully you are too. So we'll be back pretty soon with another kid video, and I hope that this one has been meaningful for you. We'll see you guys soon.